I'm not going to support a lazy, overweight woman like you, my husband yelled, not knowing I had just inherited millions of dollars and was the new owner of the corporation where he worked. In that moment, I made my decision. You disgust me. You don't even look like a wife. You look like a burden. The words cut across the dining room like a dull, rusty knife, the kind that doesn't slice cleanly but leaves a jagged, infected wound of shame. Amelia Hayes didn't answer. She couldn't. Her lips were sealed by the tremor of her pride and the long-held habit of silence. She sat with her back straight, her gaze fixed downward, watching the mashed potatoes grow cold on her plate. Across from her, Mark Serrano, her husband of 12 years, finished pouring himself a glass of red wine with an arrogance you could hear in the clinking of the glass against the table. Amelia was 38, but she felt twice that age. Her face, still beautiful under the warm glow of the dining room light, was etched with fine lines that came not from time but from ceaseless pain. She had become a mother at 26. Her son Matthew was born with a mild form of cerebral palsy that required constant care, continuous therapy, medication, and an immense amount of love. Amelia had thrown herself into that role with her entire being, setting aside her own dreams, her degree in business administration, her youth, her friends, movie nights, her freedom. Her mother, Eleanor, whom everyone called Ellie, watched in silence from her wheelchair in the corner. Ellie was 66. Her expression was marked by years of struggle, poverty, and wounded pride. She had never liked Mark, but over time, she too had learned to be quiet. Same thing again, Mark declared, wiping his mouth with a napkin he tossed carelessly onto his plate. Every single day. The same thing. Bland mashed potatoes, dry meatloaf, and that look on your face like you're playing the victim. Amelia swallowed hard. The lump in her throat hurt more than any physical blow. She glanced at Matthew, who was in his specialized chair, quietly playing with one of his sensory toys. At 11, Matthew didn't speak much, but he understood. She knew it. He felt every shout, every ounce of contempt. I'm tired. Do you hear me? Mark stared at her, his eyes glinting with fury. Tired of supporting a woman who can't even heat up a plate of food properly. Tired of coming home from the office to find this house a mess. Tired of a mother-in-law in a wheelchair who isn't even my mother. That's enough, Mark, Amelia suddenly shouted so loudly that Matthew dropped his toy. Mark looked surprised, not with fear but with mockery. Well, look who's woken up. The Sleeping Beauty has risen. Ellie raised a trembling hand in front of the child. No, please. And why not? Mark stood up, leaning his hands on the table. You want me to keep playing the role of the understanding husband, the hero. Do you know what they say about me at work? That I'm some poor sap who has to rush home to take care of a dysfunctional family? I've had it. Amelia also stood. The mashed potatoes remained untouched, a soft, gray, formless metaphor for her life. If your family is a source of shame for you, then no one is forcing you to stay. And who's going to support this house? You the invalid mother, the special needs kid, don't make me laugh. A heavy silence fell over the room. Ellie pressed her lips together until they disappeared. Matthew began to cry silently, large hot tears streaming down his cheeks uncontrollably. Just then, Amelia's phone vibrated on the table. She picked it up almost instinctively, grateful for any excuse to escape that hell. It was an unknown number. She hesitated for a second, then answered. Hello, a calm, formal male voice spoke. Am I speaking with Mrs. Amelia Hayes? Yes, this is she. I'm calling on behalf of the law firm Thompson & Grant. We need you to come to our office first thing tomorrow morning. What is this about? It concerns the last will and testament of Mr. Elias Holden. Amelia frowned. There must be a mistake. I don't know any Elias Holden. Mr. Holden legally recognized you as his daughter before his passing. You have been named the sole heir to his entire estate. Amelia's mind went blank. Mark was still shouting in the background, but she could no longer hear the words. All she heard was a buzzing, an electric current coursing through her body. Her mother, Ellie, was staring at her intently. Her eyes said what her lips could not. It's true. Amelia hung up the phone. Now what? Mark asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Did someone call to offer you a job as a professional dishwasher? Amelia looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. She didn't answer. She sat back down. Who was that? Ellie asked, her voice hoarse. A lawyer. From whom? Elias Holden. Mark let out a dry laugh. The owner of the Holden Group, the old millionaire, who was in the news a few days ago for dying alone. Amelia nodded silently. And what does he have to do with you? That's what I'm wondering. Ellie looked down. A slight tremor in her hands betrayed her. Mom, do you know something? This isn't the time. Yes, it is. Mark slammed his hand on the table. Is someone going to explain what the hell is going on? Matthew started to cough, choking on his own tears. Amelia rushed to him, hugging him tightly, cradling him against her chest. It's okay, my love. Mommy's here. Mommy's not going anywhere. Mark picked up his plate and smashed it on the floor. I'm sick of this. Tired of this sham, of this house, of this life. I'm not going to support a lazy, overweight woman like you. The silence was immediate, heavy, absolute. Amelia turned slowly. Ellie was breathing with difficulty. Matthew looked at his mother as if waiting for something, a word, a gesture, a sign. But Amelia just smiled. A small, tiny curve of her lips that no one understood, but that changed everything. You're right, she said, devoid of emotion. You won't have to support me anymore. Mark blinked. What did you say? I'm leaving tomorrow? You can keep your food, your ego, and your silence. Where do you think you're going to go? Amelia looked at her mother, then at her son. Somewhere I can breathe. And without another word, she lifted Matthew into her arms and went upstairs. Mark stood there, the broken plate scattered on the floor, wine spilled on the tablecloth, and a silence that for the first time did not obey him. Ellie watched him from her corner. He scoffed. You're all crazy in this house. She turned her head toward the window. The neighborhood lights flickered. Somewhere, the city of New York was still alive, oblivious to the daily tragedy unfolding in that house. Upstairs, Amelia was packing a duffel bag with Matthew's clothes, his medical records, and her old college textbook. At the back of the closet, she found a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were her certificates, her university degree diplomas, letters she never sent her first perfume, and a crumpled photo of David, her childhood friend and secret love. She traced the image with her fingers. She didn't cry. She wasn't broken. She was waking up. Downstairs, Mark lit another cigarette. He didn't know he had just signed his own death warrant. He didn't know that the woman he had despised was now the owner of the empire where he thought he was a king. And for the first time in a long time, she had a plan. She didn't sleep that night. While the world around her sank into darkness, Amelia prepared the essentials. Matthew's medical documents, her university transcript, the old planner where she had once scribbled her dreams, the same dreams she had put on hold since motherhood, marriage, and reality, had chained her to a life she hadn't chosen. At 5 a.m., without making a sound, she came downstairs with a suitcase in each hand and a sleeping Matthew in her arms. Her mother was waiting for her by the front door, in silence, a blanket over her legs and her eyes moist. Amelia nodded. Ellie knew it was time. They called an Uber, and when the car pulled up in front of the house, they didn't look back. Mark was sleeping soundly, the TV on an empty wine bottle next to the bed, and the false certainty that he had won. He didn't know that the only thing he had lost that night was the one thing that had ever truly held him up. Amelia rented a small, simple but clean apartment in a modest complex on the outskirts of the city. 3 cramped rooms, a bathroom with spotty hot water, damp walls, but a window from which you could see a patch of sky unobstructed by power lines. It was enough. Ellie was the first to break the silence. Are you going to tell me what that Elias Holden has to do with you? Amelia looked at her from the kitchen doorway where she was heating water to prepare some oatmeal for Matthew. Is it true, what the lawyer said? Ellie looked down. The trembling of her hands wasn't from the cold. I was very young, 19. I worked as a secretary in an office. Your biological father was the owner of that company. His name was Elias. He was married and I was a fool. A chill ran down Amelia's spine. He abandoned me. He asked me to have an abortion. I refused and he fired me. He never looked for me again. But his wife died years later, and it seems guilt brought him remorse. He investigated, found you, and legally acknowledged you recently. He didn't want you to know while he was alive, which is why his will is so peculiar. Amelia closed her eyes for a moment. Her real father was a millionaire, one of the richest men in the country, the owner of the Holden Group. The name now carried a different weight. The Holden Group was a technology and infrastructure conglomerate with thousands of employees, government contracts, and offices across the country. A giant. And now, according to that lawyer, she was the sole heir. But it wasn't the wealth that kept her awake. It was the fact that Mark worked there, in the very empire she had just inherited. Over the next few weeks, Amelia moved in silence. She started therapy with a psychologist named Dr. Evelyn Reed, a specialist in survivors of emotional abuse. She exercised at home, ate better. She learned to breathe before responding, to say no without fear, to look at herself in the mirror without shame. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but with each passing day, the face that looked back at her from the mirror was more her own, less molded by Mark. Matthew was enrolled in a new specialized pediatric therapy center. Thanks to her inherited resources, she could pay for his sessions without depending on anyone. His smile improved. He started making sounds he hadn't made in years. Though he couldn't form full words every time he looked at his mother, his eyes said what his mouth could not. "Thank you." Ellie in her chair by the window, knitted in silence. She no longer needed to speak. She knew the change was happening and it was real. One morning, the Holden Group's lawyer sent a package by courier. Inside were legal documents, deeds, stock certificates, and a handwritten letter signed by Elias Holden. "I failed you as a father, but I am giving you back the power that was always yours. Not so you'll forgive me, but so you can decide what to do with my name." Amelia didn't cry. She felt no nostalgia. She felt a sense of direction. She requested a meeting with the executives of the Holden Group. It was David who arranged it. David, her childhood friend, the only one who hadn't disappeared when things got tough, showed up at her apartment door with a box of fresh fruit and a nervous smile. "Can I come in?" Amelia let him in without a word. "I heard about Elias," he said. "I found out through a colleague. Holden had a secret daughter, an heir. When I heard your name, I couldn't believe it. Well, now you know. What do you think I should do? What no one ever did for me? Find justice." David was a financial analyst, but he was also an honest and loyal man, the kind who never got mud on him even when everyone around him did. He was the one who revealed that Mark worked in the projects division, that he was rising quickly, and that he was rumored to be considered for director of operations, a position with access to multi-million-dollar contracts. All of it thanks to inflated reports, manipulated data, and an enviable ability to pretend he knew more than he actually did. And something else, David said, looking at the floor. "He's having an affair with Harper. She's new, a recent grad, pretty smart. She spends a lot of time in his office." Amelia didn't blink. "How long? A few months? Maybe more." "And how do you know?" "I saw pictures, heard conversations. I heard him bragging at a meeting. He boasts about what he has, what he's missing at home. He calls you a burden, a weight." Amelia clenched her fists, not with rage, but with a surge of strength. "I want to get inside the company. Not as president. Not yet. I want to see who's who, from the ground up. I want to meet the people who work there, the ones Mark steps on, the ones nobody sees." David helped her arrange discreet visits. She introduced herself as an external consultant for personnel evaluation under an alias. She went to the headquarters, walked through the offices, and spoke with the cleaning staff, the technicians, and the receptionists. No one knew who she really was, not even Harper Jenkins, who greeted her with a polite smile, unaware that she was standing in front of the legal wife of the man she was sleeping with. Mark didn't see her, or if he did, he didn't recognize her. She had gained a little weight, yes, but her clothes were different. Her posture had changed. She was no longer the woman hunched over with guilt. She was now a confident figure of measured words and heavy silences. On her second visit, an employee took her to the projects division. Mark was there explaining a supposed material, saving on a whiteboard that no one understood, but everyone pretended to. "As you can see," he said, "we've managed to reduce concrete expenditure by 27%. Thanks to an intelligent redistribution of the foundations, we are pure efficiency." Amelia stayed in the shadows behind a column observing. She listened to him speak. He used bombastic words, confusing statistics, a condescending tone. He felt powerful. A senior executive, a Mr. Harrison, recognized her not by her face, but by the name on her security badge. "Excuse me, are you the new president?" "Not yet," Amelia replied. "For now, I'm just an observer." Harrison swallowed, understood, and said nothing more. At the end of the day, Amelia was invited to an internal performance review meeting. David accompanied her. She sat in the back behind a one-way mirror in an adjacent conference room. No one knew she was there. Mark entered first. He wore an expensive suit, strong cologne, and a rehearsed smile. He greeted several people with pats on the back, empty laughter, and false promises. "Today, we're going to present the quarterly results," he said, connecting his laptop to the projector. "I think you'll all be impressed." Amelia watched him in silence. What she felt wasn't rage, it was pity. Because everything he thought he had wasn't his. It was borrowed, stolen, faked. While Mark spoke, Amelia opened her notebook and wrote a single sentence, "He has no idea." And she smiled not with mockery, but with certainty. Because in that moment, she understood that true power wasn't in shouting or slamming the table or humiliating others. True power was knowing who you are, and who you never need to be again. Amelia closed her notebook firmly. The murmur of the meeting continued behind the polarized glass, while Mark, with his false charisma, kept showing off to the executives. Unaware that his days were numbered, she didn't need to interrupt. She didn't need to humiliate him in front of everyone. Not yet. She would bring him down with the same lies he had sown. She left the room without a word. David followed her, a mix of concern and pride on his face. In the elevator, she didn't speak, just looked at their reflection in the steel mirror. Two figures that were once fragments now beginning to piece themselves together. When they reached the parking garage, she broke the silence. I want every contract from the last 6 months reviewed. I need an internal audit team, one that isn't corrupt. Do you have anyone in mind? Yes, and I want him to start this week. His name is Samuel. David raised an eyebrow. Samuel Reed, Leonore's son, the kid with Asperger's. Yes, I met him at the center where Matthew has therapy. He was helping organize the therapy games, memorizing schedules, names, codes. He has a brilliant mind. They need him, even if they don't know it. David didn't object. He had already learned that when Amelia made decisions like this, there was always a deeper reason. The next day, Samuel arrived with a worn-out backpack, scuffed shoes, and a shirt that was too big for him. He walked with his head down, talking to himself in a very low voice. But when he entered the office assigned to him next to Amelia's, everything changed. His gaze fixed on the computer as if it were a musical instrument, and in less than 20 minutes, he had already detected small inconsistencies in 3 billing documents. Amelia watched him with interest as he explained his color-coding system. Every file has a pattern. When they break that pattern, I know there's a mistake, or a lie. And how do you tell one from the other? Samuel looked at her directly as if the question needed no answer. Lies have a smell, and he returned to his screen. In parallel, Amelia's orders began to be implemented. Cross-checks were carried out in all administrative areas. Sick leaves, after-hours departures, and technical reports were reviewed. Mark began to notice the change, but he interpreted it as part of a typical transition process when a new president takes over. What he didn't know was that the president was already there among them, disguised as a shadow, a protocol, a familiar face that had not yet been revealed. It was Samuel who detected the first sign of serious irregularity. An archived email in a hidden folder within the shared project system. In that email, Mark exchanged messages with an external supplier called Crestview Solutions, which was not listed in the official database of approved contractors. Attached were modified blueprints of public structures along with inflated expense figures. Samuel handed the information to Amelia without a word, just a small sticky note that said, "Doesn't match." Amelia read it and realized that Crestview was not just a ghost supplier. It was being used to launder money. Mark had been diverting funds for longer than she had imagined. Meanwhile, Harper continued to appear in the visitor logs for Mark's office after hours, always after 6 p.m., always with envelopes in hand, always with a perfume so strong it lingered in the air, long after she had gone. Amelia watched her one of those nights on a security camera. Harper sat on Mark's lap. He caressed her leg. She laughed with a practiced coquettishness, but her gaze at times seemed lost in something darker. Something wasn't right. Days later, Harper requested a private meeting with Human Resources. She cited stress, anxiety, morning sickness. The department head coldly informed Amelia. She has requested a temporary leave. She says she needs to get some tests done. Amelia didn't react publicly, but she called David as soon as she had a moment alone. She's pregnant. Are you sure? Completely. And she's not going to say who the father is. That same night, Ellie had an episode. Amelia arrived at the apartment to find her mother semi-conscious with weak breathing and a raging fever. They rushed her to the nearest Metropolitan General Hospital. The diagnosis was a respiratory infection complicated by her age and chronic condition. While the doctor stabilized her, Amelia sat with Matthew in the waiting room. The boy stroked his sensory toy, his eyes fixed on the floor. Amelia took his hand. I promise you, Grandma is going to be okay. Matthew didn't answer, but he squeezed her hand tightly. Amelia couldn't help but cry. Everything she was building could crumble at any moment. Power couldn't buy time or reverse the damage accumulated by years of silence. The next morning, while Ellie slept connected to an IV, Amelia returned to the office. Samuel was waiting for her with another report. This time it was a recording. I didn't know it was on, Samuel explained, showing his voice recorder he used to log his scattered thoughts. He played the audio. Mark was talking to someone else unidentified, but the tone was clear. exchange of information leaks, promises of under-the-table payments, and something more. If the board doesn't approve my promotion, I'll do what we talked about. I have the data and a contact in the press. Amelia closed her eyes. Mark was blackmailing the top management. He was willing to sink the company if he didn't get what he wanted, like a child who breaks a toy when he's not allowed to keep it. Later, as Amelia processed everything, David approached with a folder, the list of employees who had reported harassment in recent months. No formal action was taken. The victims were afraid. Regarding Mark, there are 5 mentions of his name, all dismissed without investigation. 4 women, 1 man. Amelia swallowed hard. She knew what he was capable of. She had lived it. But reading it in the reports, feeling it so close, turned her stomach. That night, David invited her to dinner, not at an expensive restaurant, but at a small diner across from a park. They ordered burgers and hot soup. They spoke little, eating in silence until David broke the wall. "Why don't you hate me? What makes you think I don't? Because you still let me be near." After what happened with Harper, Amelia looked at him for a long moment, then looked down. "Because I know what it feels like to make a mistake out of loneliness. I'm not justifying you, but I understand. I don't want you to understand me. I want you to believe me. Believe that I care about you." Amelia didn't answer. She finished her soup in silence. The next day, Harper appeared at a gynecologist's clinic downtown. Matthew had therapy in the same building. Amelia didn't see her, but Samuel recognized her from a photo David had shown him. And she wasn't alone. David was with her. Samuel, unaware of the danger, took a picture with his phone and sent it to Amelia with a single word. "Today." Amelia stared at the image for several seconds. David next to Harper in a waiting room, his arm on the back of the seat, her face serious. Nothing in the photo confirmed anything, but it didn't deny it either. She froze. She felt her whole body tense. Harper was pregnant. David was with her. What if the child wasn't Mark's? What if everything was more twisted than it seemed? What if the betrayal came from the person she least expected? The clock struck 6 p.m. The city lights began to glow. Amelia, looking out her office window at the tall buildings, repeated a phrase she knew by heart. The trap is set. Now all they have to do is make a false move. Amelia left the phone on the desk. The image was burned into her retina like an oil stain that refused to disappear. David in a clinic waiting room with Harper. Her belly slightly rounded him, sitting too close. Not a caress, not a smile, but the complicity was there, invisible to those who don't know how to read gazes. Amelia knew. She knew all too well. The silence in the office grew dense, almost physical. Samuel at his desk pretended to review papers, but his eyes darted nervously. He had noticed the change in Amelia's expression, the sudden hardening of her jaw, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the table. He didn't dare speak. Amelia took a deep breath, counted to 5, then stood up. She grabbed her purse, left the documents stacked, and walked out of the building without looking at anyone. The cold night air hit her face like a reproach. She walked 3 blocks to an empty coffee shop. She ordered a black coffee, sat at the farthest table, and contemplated the unthinkable. What if David had lied? What if the child Harper was expecting wasn't Mark's, but his? What if the only clean man she had left was also rotten inside? It wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't wounded pride. It was something else. It was the feeling that everyone she touched betrayed her. First, her mother hiding who her real father was. Then Mark with years of humiliation. Now perhaps David. Everyone but Matthew. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She looked at the screen. It was the clinic. She answered immediately. "Miss Hayes, yes, this is she. You need to come. Your son has had a respiratory crisis. He's under observation, but we need your consent to move him to the pediatric intensive care unit." The world shrank. She left the coffee untouched and ran to the main avenue to hail a cab. She didn't remember how she got there, the traffic lights or the car headlights. She only remembered getting out of the car, running down the hospital corridor, opening the door to the observation area, and seeing him there so small with an oxygen mask, his lips purple, his body still. "Matthew," she whispered, approaching. A young doctor explained that the boy had entered a state of mild hypoxia, likely due to a type of fibrosis that hadn't been detected. They performed a CT scan, a battery of analyses, and lung function tests. Amelia didn't fully understand the medical terms, but the important words were clear. Specialized care in Boston. Experimental treatment. Expensive, immediate. Salvation or resignation. How much does it cost? More than can be paid without institutional support. Amelia looked him in the eye. "I can pay for it." "Are you sure?" "Don't hesitate." Matthew was stabilized, but he had to travel soon. The treatment needed to start before the fibrosis progressed further. Amelia spent the night in a chair by his bed. In the early morning, when the boy opened his eyes, the first thing he said was, "Mom, why doesn't Daddy love me?" The question hit her like a bullet. Amelia froze. Matthew wasn't looking at her directly. He was looking at the ceiling, his lips dry, his voice barely audible. Amelia felt the air leave her chest. "It's not that he doesn't love you," she whispered. "It's that he doesn't know how." "Did I do something wrong?" "No, my love. You are perfect. The problem is his, not yours." "Then why doesn't he live with us? Because I didn't want him near. Because you and I are better off without someone who hurts us." Matthew closed his eyes again. A tear slowly crossed his cheek. Amelia wiped it away with her fingers. She felt helpless, furious, hurt. The child she had defended with her entire being was now asking if he was to blame for not being loved, all because that despicable man had been unable to see what he had in front of him. The next morning, Ellie came to the hospital. They brought her in a wheelchair, pale, her eyelids drooping, her voice raspy. Amelia explained the situation. Ellie nodded without speaking. She was thinner. Her skin had dark spots. A cough racked her whole body. When Matthew fell asleep, Amelia took her to the hospital cafeteria. There, while stirring sugar into a cup of tea, Ellie spoke. "You hate me for hiding it from you." Amelia didn't answer. "I understood as soon as you said his name. I knew that sooner or later the truth would come out. It wasn't just a man. It was an entire life. You took away my chance to know who I was. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to protect you. Protect you from becoming a copy of him." Amelia looked up. "What do you mean? Your father wasn't just a coward. He was cruel. He didn't just fire me. He threatened me. He told me that if I spoke, he would erase my name from the world. He had connections, money, power. You were a stain on his record. And yet he left you his fortune. Because guilt is never erased. It only transforms. He gave you the money he wouldn't give you in life, but don't confuse it with love." Amelia swallowed. There was a knot in her chest she didn't know how to untangle. Ellie was trembling. The tea splashed onto her fingers. "I don't have much time left," she whispered. "I feel it in my body, and I don't want to leave without telling you this. If you ever have to choose between revenge and love, choose love. Because revenge doesn't fill you, it doesn't heal you. It only postpones the emptiness." Amelia looked at her for a long time. The image of David returned to her mind. Harper pregnant. The doubt, the pain, the rage. That night, returning to the apartment, she found an envelope under the door. It had no return address. She opened it with cold hands. Inside, photos. Mark meeting with a group of men in a discreet office. She recognized one of them, Peter Robles, a former partner of the Holden Group expelled years ago for embezzlement. Another was a lawyer with a history of money laundering. The third, the same contact from Crestview Solutions. Mark was selling secrets. Mark was allying with the company's enemies. Mark was willing to do anything for more power. It was the next day that Samuel found the rest. On a forgotten USB drive in the print room, recordings, notes, and a video. In it, Mark spoke directly to the camera. "This is an insurance policy in case they leave me out. I have copies of the bidding documents, the names of the ghost employees, the dates of the transfers. If they take me out of the game, we all go down." Amelia stored the USB drive in a safe, then locked herself in the bathroom, faced the mirror, and looked at herself for a long time. She had everything in her hands, the evidence, the power, the opportunity to destroy him. And yet something inside her trembled. She buried her face in her hands, leaned on the sink, and slowly sank to the floor. She cried silently with a sadness that came not just from betrayal but from loss. Because every step toward justice took her further from something she also needed: peace. And between her tears, she asked herself in a low whisper, so low that only her reflection heard her. "What if I become him?" Amelia let the question hang in the air, unanswered. As the silence of the bathroom grew heavier than her own curled-up body on the floor, the dried tears left tracks on her skin. She wasn't crying from rage. She was crying from exhaustion, from disappointment, from that strange mix of justice and guilt that gnawed at her chest. She had come so far, she had everything, and yet something was hollowing her out from the inside. She stood up slowly, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at herself in the mirror again. This time, the question dissipated. She was not like him, because she had the power to crush, but also the ability to decide how to use it. She didn't sleep that night. She compiled a list of dates, documents, names, and recordings. The puzzle was complete. Mark had not only betrayed his family, He had corrupted the place that provided a livelihood for hundreds of workers. He had manipulated reports, threatened employees, covered up abuses, and was now preparing to sell the Holden Group's database to international competitors. Amelia could not stay silent any longer. At dawn, she gathered the company's legal team. She demanded an urgent summons for all employees and executives, a general assembly in the main auditorium, with not a single empty seat. What was about to happen there was not a simple announcement. It was the collapse of an empire built on lies. At 10 a.m. the auditorium lights dimmed. Over 300 people occupied their seats, murmuring among themselves. No one knew for sure what was happening, but the air smelled of something imminent. The rumors were many layoffs, an impending merger, the new president finally making an appearance. Mark arrived, dressed as if he owned the world. New suit silk, tie arrogant smile. He greeted several people with pats on the back, empty laughter and false promises. He sat in the front row and crossed his legs brazenly. He had no idea what was about to happen. David was in the sound control booth. Samuel, sitting beside the stage, held a small, folded piece of paper in his hands. Ellie wasn't there. The hospital had decided to keep her for observation as her condition worsened daily. Amelia walked onto the stage amidst murmurs. She wore a simple black pantsuit unadorned. Her face was serene, not a drop of makeup, not a hint of a smile. She gripped the microphone firmly. "Good morning. I am formally introducing myself to you. My name is Amelia Hayes Holden. I am the president of this company." There was a stunned silence. Some mouths fell open, others turned toward Mark, whose face was now as rigid as marble. A whisper spread like wildfire through the auditorium. Amelia continued without pause. "For the past few weeks, I have been observing the internal workings of this company not as president, but as one of you. From the inside, I have walked your halls, reviewed files, and listened to conversations. And what I have discovered compels me to speak to you today with evidence, with truth, and with consequences," she signaled to David. On the giant screen in the auditorium, the first video appeared. Mark negotiating with the illegal supplier, receiving envelopes laughing as he explained how to inflate budgets. Then the recording of the threat to the board: "If they take me out of the game, we all go down." Later, a chain of emails proving the use of false identities to justify non-existent overtime. Faces transformed as the evidence appeared. Some employees covered their mouths with their hands. Others took notes desperately. No one spoke. No one dared. Amelia paced the stage as if each step were an act of liberation. "And it doesn't end here," she said firmly. Mr. Mark Serrano has also been reported for harassing multiple employees, reports that were ignored out of fear, manipulation, or protection. Those people will have their voice today." She paused. She looked directly at Mark, who was now white as a sheet, sweating, clenching his fists on his knees. "What you built with lies crumbles today with the truth." Mark stood up abruptly. "Don't do this to me, Amelia. Not here." Amelia didn't look away. "Not here. Where then? At home in the bed where you lied, in the company where you stole?" Mark lunged toward the stage, trying to snatch the microphone from her. David intervened. 2 security guards grabbed Mark by the arms. "You're nothing without me. I pulled you out of misery. I made you a woman." Samuel rose from his seat. He walked slowly to where Amelia and Mark were. He held the folded piece of paper between his fingers. He handed it to Mark without a word, then returned to his seat. Mark, confused, opened the paper. He read in silence. "What you did hurt me. You called me weird. You said I was a nuisance. But I found someone who believes in me. You don't deserve to destroy what she is building." Mark let the letter fall. The room erupted in murmurs again. Some clapped, others recorded with their phones. Amelia took the microphone one last time. "This is not the end. It is the beginning of a clean, fair, and humane place. And to achieve that, the corruption must go. The cruelty must go. And you, Mark, must go." The guards escorted him toward the exit. No one said goodbye. No one approached him. Harper in the last row bowed her head. When Mark disappeared through the door, Amelia looked at Harper. "Before we close this assembly, there is something else that must be said." Harper stood up, her face pale, her hands trembling. She walked to the stage and took the microphone with icy fingers. "I'm pregnant. And everyone thought it was Mark's. It's not." There was a collective gasp. "The father is David." Amelia closed her eyelids. There was no rage. No scandal. Just a knot slowly untying as if she had already known. David closed his eyes. Harper returned the microphone and left without looking at anyone. Her heels echoed like war drums on the auditorium floor. She was the last to leave. Exiting the building, Amelia saw it was raining. The drops hit the asphalt violently. In the distance, a figure walked slowly in the rain. It was Mark alone without an umbrella, his suit soaked, his gaze lost. Amelia followed him for a few yards. He sensed her presence and stopped. "Have you come to mock me?" "No. To tell me I deserve this, not that either." Amelia stood in front of him, looking him directly in the eyes. This was never about revenge. It was about justice. Amelia left the sentence hanging in the air, like a door closing softly without a sound, but with an unforgettable weight. Mark didn't answer. He just stood there in the rain, soaked, his arms limp, and his face broken like an old building whose foundations had just been removed. Amelia didn't look at him again. She turned and walked away without hurry, with the serenity of someone who has finally buried a corpse they'd been carrying on their back for years. The following days passed in heavy silences and decisive actions. Amelia didn't revel in her triumph, nor did she get drunk on public glory. Instead, she sat alone in her office, drafted a letter, and called a meeting with the company's most senior members. "I am establishing a special program," she announced. "A support network for single mothers, children with disabilities, and employees in vulnerable situations. It will be called Project Matthew." The room fell silent. Some exchanged surprised glances. No one expected this. Everyone thought the new president would clean house, fire a few people and focus on investments, not create a social arm from the ashes of an internal war. Amelia didn't ask for their opinion. She just gave clear instructions: automatic donations from her salary funds allocated for scholarships, expanded medical coverage, partnerships with local clinics. In less than 2 weeks, Project Matthew had an office, an operational team, and dozens of beneficiaries. Samuel was appointed the project's technical coordinator. He had earned it without asking. His dedication, precision, and humanity made him indispensable. Amelia gave him free rein to select his staff. The young man walked with more confidence, his gaze no longer so downcast, his sentences longer, though he still fell silent when he felt words were not enough. One morning, returning from the grocery store with a bag in his hand, Samuel stopped when he saw a man lying in the corner of an alley. He wore a torn coat, his hands were dirty, and his hair was disheveled. As he got closer, he recognized the face. It was Mark. He was sitting on a damp piece of cardboard, shivering, his gaze lost. Samuel hesitated for a moment, then took a granola bar from his backpack and offered it. "I don't have any money," he said in his soft voice, "but maybe this will help." Mark looked at him. For the first time in years, he truly saw him, not with superiority, not with sarcasm. He looked at him like someone who recognizes they've hit rock bottom. He took the bar with trembling hands, then covered his face and began to weep. It wasn't a cry of rage. It was one that sounded of shame, defeat, and pure regret. Samuel stood there for a few seconds, then walked away in silence without looking back. He never told Amelia about this. Meanwhile, Harper had resigned from the company. She left a curt letter without complaints and moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. She didn't ask for help. She didn't contact David or Amelia. She started working in a neighborhood bookstore, selling novels and school supplies. She was 7 months pregnant. One Friday afternoon, David went to see her. He brought a box of baby clothes. He knocked on the door. Harper opened it unsurprised. "Hi," he said, looking at the floor. "You can come in if you want." David entered. The place was modest but clean. It smelled of hot soup. In a corner, a rocking chair. On the wall, a framed photograph of an open field. "I didn't come to claim anything," he said. "I just wanted to see how you are." "I'm learning," she replied. "It wasn't easy, but I'm okay. Do you need anything? I'm managing. And I don't want to depend on you. I don't want you to think I was looking for anything more than a mistake." David lowered his head. "It never should have happened." "It did," Harper said without resentment. "And from that night, this was born. A life. I'm not asking you to be a father if you don't want to, but I'm not going to hide him either." David left the box on the table. "I'm not ready. I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm not going to disappear completely." Harper nodded. There were no more words, no tears. It was the end of something that never really began right. That night, David went to see Amelia. She was in her office signing documents. She didn't look up when he entered. "Are you here to give me more news?" David sat across from her. his face tense. I didn't come to justify myself. I know I failed. I failed you when you needed to trust the most. Amelia put down her pen. She looked at him with tired eyes. Why? Because I was broken. Because I confused tenderness with escape. Because I was weak. And while you were confusing things, I was rebuilding myself piece by piece. I know. And what do you want now? Forgiveness? No. I just wanted to look you in the eye and tell you that despite everything I admire you, and if I can ever earn a place back in your life, even as someone you don't hate, I'll be around. Amelia remained silent, then nodded slightly. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but I don't want to live with hate either. David smiled sadly. That's more than I deserve. Before leaving, he left a folder on her desk. It's the proposal for the public hospital you mentioned. It's ready. It just needs your signature. Amelia glanced at it without a word. A week later, she called a press conference. She announced a multi-million-dollar donation to Metropolitan General Hospital. The funds would be used to renovate the pediatric wing, acquire state-of-the-art equipment, and create a specialized unit for rare childhood diseases. This isn't charity, she said at the end. It's social justice. It's giving back what the world has taken from so many of us. And I do it in the name of my son, Matthew. That same day, Matthew was transferred to the airport with a medical team. The treatment at the specialized center in Boston was already coordinated. Amelia traveled with him. Samuel was left in charge of the project temporarily. Ellie, due to her delicate state, remained in the hospital. The treatment started well. For the first few days, Matthew responded positively. Amelia was with him at every session, reading him stories, singing to him, telling him about the ocean. The boy smiled, albeit weakly, with the tenderness only children can give. But in the second week, things changed. High fever, unstable pulse, difficult breathing. The doctors took urgent measures. The fibrosis had spread more than expected. The treatment was aggressive. His small, tired body couldn't handle it well. Amelia stayed up all night. At dawn, a doctor entered with a grave face. We have to induce a medical coma. It's the only way to prevent more damage. If we don't, he could collapse. Amelia pressed her lips together, nodding through her tears. Before they sedated him, she leaned over him. I love you, my sweet boy. You're just going to rest for a little while. When you wake up, I'll be right here just like always. Matthew looked at her tired and with a thread of a voice asked, Will you sing to me when I wake up? Amelia nodded. Yes, my love. I'll sing to you every day if you want. The boy closed his eyes. The monitor showed a slow, steady frequency. The doctors worked in silence. Amelia remained in the chair without moving, like a statue, bleeding from the inside. Matthew had entered a coma, and a part of her had too. And so, as the world kept turning, Amelia felt her soul finally bleed without hiding, because justice isn't celebrated, it's sustained. And sometimes it's paid for with what hurts the most. The room where Matthew slept in a coma was filled with machines that breathed for him. The constant hum of the monitor, the faint beep of each heartbeat, the artificial breath setting the rhythm of his fight. Amelia didn't move. She had grown accustomed to the pain of seeing her son motionless, not laughing, not speaking those few words that always brightened her day. Every second in that room was a constant decision not to fall apart. The medical staff was gentle. They treated her with a mix of respect and compassion, but no one could tell her what she most wanted to hear, that her son would come back. Not with certainty, not with a guarantee, only with hope. And hope, at that moment, was a thin line that broke with every piece of bad news. That morning, while Amelia moistened Matthew's lips with a swab, she received a call from her lawyer. Mark had been admitted to the county medical center with a severe case of pneumonia. He was found unconscious on the street, malnourished and hypothermic. No family had claimed him. No one knew where he lived. Amelia hung up without saying much. Hours passed. She thought about it. She thought about it again until she finally grabbed a folder, a handwritten letter, and left the hospital where Matthew continued to sleep, his soul in suspense. The county medical center smelled of cheap disinfectant. The room where Mark was recovering was at the end of a windowless hallway. He was awake but gaunt. His beard was overgrown, his eyes sunken, his skin grayish. When he saw her enter, he sat up clumsily, a hint of shame in his gaze. What are you doing here? Amelia didn't answer. She took a folded piece of paper from her purse and left it on the bedside table. It's a letter from Matthew. He wrote it before our trip. He left it for you in case something happened. Mark swallowed. He's in a coma, she said bluntly. Fighting as always. Mark said nothing. He took the paper with trembling fingers, opened it, and recognized his son's messy handwriting. As he read, tears began to slide down his cheeks uncontrollably. When he finished, he clutched it to his chest as if it were a shield or a confession. Amelia watched him in silence. She felt no hatred, only a distant echo of compassion, of pity for what could never be. "What you did can't be fixed," she said without harshness. "But you can start over. Not with me, not with Matthew. With yourself." She left the room without waiting for a reply. That same afternoon, as the sky outside the hospital windows grew cloudy, the monitor beside Matthew's bed emitted a different sound, a slight change in rhythm. Doctors rushed in. Amelia approached as if each step cost her soul, and then she saw it. His fingers moved, then his eyelids. Slowly, with tremendous effort, Matthew opened his eyes. "Mom," he whispered. It was as if the world had turned back on. Amelia fell to her knees beside the bed, crying, kissing his hands, repeating his name like a prayer. The doctor smiled discreetly. Matthew looked at her as if he knew he had returned from a very distant place just for her. "Will you sing to me?" he asked in his weak voice. "Of course, my love," Amelia said. "For the rest of your life if you want." They returned home weeks later. The treatment had worked. Matthew was stronger. He didn't run or shout like other children, but he was alive, and that was enough. Upon her return, Amelia was hailed as a symbol of strength, but she no longer wanted that role. She didn't want to be the woman on a pedestal. She had seen too much, felt too much. She publicly resigned from the presidency of the Holden Group. She did it without applause, without long speeches. She simply said, "I didn't come to stay in power. I came to clean up a company and protect a life. I have done that." The board of directors accepted her decision with respect. Samuel was promoted to general coordinator of Project Matthew. His intelligence, sensitivity, and sense of duty made him perfect to lead the social division. Shortly after, an international organization invited him to give a TED Talk at the company headquarters. On the day of the event, the auditorium was full. Samuel walked onto the stage with a notebook in his hand, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "When I was a kid, people told me I was weird, that I talked to myself too much, that I looked at things wrong, that I didn't fit in. And that hurt me a lot until I met someone who didn't ask me to fit in, who gave me space to be who I am. That person taught me that respect isn't an option. It's a human necessity. Today I'm here to tell you something simple. When you respect someone, you are weaving the future. Because where there is respect, the possibility of a better life is born." The audience applauded. Some were crying. Amelia, from the back row, felt something inside her heal as well. David, for his part, had returned to work as an independent consultant. He kept in touch with Amelia, but without intruding. Their relationship transformed into a friendly distance. Harper gave birth to a healthy boy. She named him Gabriel. David visited him, cared for him, and held him with clumsy but sincere hands. Harper never demanded anything from him. They raised the child in peace, without drama, without unnecessary titles. Ellie, however, didn't last long. Her already fragile body slowly faded. Amelia stayed with her until her last breath. On her deathbed, her mother took her hand and whispered, "Thank you for being stronger than I was." Amelia could only tell her she loved her and watched her go with the peace she never had in life. Days after the funeral, while organizing her mother's belongings, she found a sealed box with a letter on top. It was addressed to her. She read it sitting by the window, the sun filtering through the curtains. "Dear daughter, if you are reading this, I am gone. I don't ask for your forgiveness for what I hid. I only leave you my gratitude. Because you did what I could not. Because you took the pain and turned it into something dignified. Because you chose love, even when you could have chosen to destroy. Do not inherit my fear. Inherit your own light." Amelia closed the letter with trembling hands. She no longer needed more answers or explanations. What she had was enough. What was left was her life. She moved near the coast to a simple house with large windows and a porch where Matthew played with his sensory toys. There she wrote, cooked, and walked. No one recognized her, no one applauded her, and that made her happy. One morning, Matthew brought her an old notebook. He opened it and she saw a page written in clumsy but determined strokes. It was a diary entry. "Did you write this?" The boy nodded. Amelia read aloud. "My mom isn't a lazy, overweight woman. She's the bravest woman in the world." Her voice broke. She hugged him tightly with tenderness, with everything she had, and knew in that instant that it had all been worth it. Because forgiveness is not forgetting. It's freeing yourself from the one who hurt you. And so, in a corner of the world where the ocean sings instead of shouting, where silence doesn't hurt but embraces, the light was finally born.